It is Sunday, June 30th, and this is the Georgia Gang. Good morning. I'm Russ Spencer, in for Lori Geary. President Biden's performance in the Atlanta debate raises new questions about his age and his fitness to serve another 4 years. A new poll shows young Georgians in particular are unhappy with both presidential candidates, and RFK Jr. could be a spoiler. And four political heavyweights, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, come together to fight election falsehoods, saying Georgia voters can have confidence in our system. Others say not so fast. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Brian are here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Well, the stakes could hardly have been higher. Joe Biden and Donald Trump, 81 and 78 respectively, faced off on Thursday, more than 4 months before the November election, the first such contest between a current and former president. And despite extensive prep at Camp David, President Biden got off to a shaky start. 12 minutes in, he lost his train of thought in an answer about taxes on the rich.
We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
When he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened, I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
That second exchange was 22 minutes into the debate. Afterward, President Biden said it's hard to debate a liar. And former President Trump did tell some falsehoods about late-term abortion, NATO funding, their respective tax plans, January 6th, and voter fraud, among other things. But polls show viewers give Trump the win by a 2-to-1 margin. So let's bring in the panel. Melita, let's begin with you. Did President Biden look like someone who's ready for 4 more years as president?
It was not his finest hour, and I think we would be untruthful to not admit that. But he does show a grasp of policy positions and the fact that he is a hands-on president who knows what he's doing. And he has good intentions, a vast knowledge of public policy, a strong command of facts and figures, even if he sometimes stumbled over the words in getting those things out. He is a decent and honest man, and he has restored respect for America abroad. And by contrast, President Trump is a failed businessman, convicted felon, out on bond while he awaits sentencing. And he faces criminal trials for 3 other indictments. And Trump said last night that the president indicted him because he was a political opponent. Actually, the former president was indicted by 3 different grand jury pools in various locations. So that was a very big underlying lie among many that the former president used last night.
All right, Phil, what's the Republican response to all this?
Well, I think not only the Republican response, but the American response was embarrassment, and the polls will show that. Here's the leader of the United States of America and the free world, stumbling, mumbling, freezing. You cannot have this in a world that's blowing up, in the words of Donald Trump. You saw a contrast between strength and weakness on that Thursday night debate. For a quick example, a general who was overhearing President Trump dealing with the leader of the radical Taliban, he used language we couldn't use on this program, said, if you harm one American soldier, we're going to get you in where you live. That's the type of leadership we need in this world where we've got wars in Gaza and elsewhere. And I think that talking about lies, I tell you what, you can fact check as much as you want, but I think when Trump had an idea how you deal with inflation, how you grow yourself out of it, and how you're going to handle foreign policy and the open southern borders, which Biden doesn't even know what he's talking about. When you have, talking about lies, when you have a president saying no American soldiers were killed under my watch, Biden said all of these tall tales too. It's incredible.
They both did say some falsehoods, there's no question about it. Theron, President Biden stuck at 38% approval rating. Hard to imagine that he could win at 38%. Hard to imagine that after last night it's going to go up, at least in the short term. Where are Democrats in all this? You've heard all the discussion already. It began on Thursday night about potentially replacing Joe Biden on the ticket.
And we're here on Friday morning as we tape. And so like many Democrats, you have to watch that debate, and I agree with Melita. The president of the United States of America was not as polished as he could have been in that debate, but he's a good person. He's a patriot. And I want to commend him for standing up there for an hour and a half and conveying to the American people the substance that he's been doing. I mean, this president has a good record. He's had a good 3.5 years. He had a bad hour and a half as far as substance. As far as articulating the substance. Now, do you become president of the United States of America by winning or losing debates? No. We got to remember, Donald Trump lost every single debate, I believe, to Hillary Clinton. He went on to be president. So when you talk about the polling, I think that the Biden campaign has got to really get back into the room and figure out where do they go from here. As far as conversations about candidates, look, Russ, there were already sort of kind of quiet conversations about both men. There were Republicans once upon a time wondering, do we want Donald Trump to be our nominee? They were looking for an alternative. Yes, there will be a conversation that Democrats will have privately. And honestly, I'm not willing to have that conversation because Joe Biden is our nominee. Now, he hasn't been nominated yet, but he's been duly elected by the delegates in the states to be the Democratic nominee. And then lastly, look, I would just tell everybody, look in the camera, tell Democrats, don't panic. We've been here before. In 2012, when Barack Obama had a bad performance against Mitt Romney, I was in the Obama national headquarters. A lot of liberals went crazy and said, oh my God, we're going to lose the race. Well, we know what happened. It was a turning point in the campaign. Obama went on to win. So I think you will have another turning point in this campaign with a Biden campaign that's got to capitalize on.
All right. But President Obama was 30 years younger, and what happened last night would seem to have reinforced, Brian, people's concerns about the president's age. He took a chance doing this debate earlier than debates had ever been done before even the nomination officially, and now he's going to have to live with the consequences at least until November. I don't know if there's going to be a debate in September, but what are your thoughts about all this?
If there is a debate in September, it is a second act of political malpractice by the Biden campaign team. These are the folks who are with him every day, who are in the Oval Office, who are with him at Camp David. They knew what was coming. How in the world did they agree to do this? They have been seeing this for weeks. If I was them, what they should have done was say, we're not going to be on the stage with Donald Trump. He's a liar. He is a convicted felon, and we are not going to lower the presidency of the United States and be on the same stage as him. They had an out. Instead, they let their egos and hubris get the better of them. They could have waited until the very end, until October, kind of where this is already set in concrete. Doing it this early, this is irreparable. What happened with Obama and Romney in 2012, not one person was coming out of that debate the next day going, we should replace Obama on the ballot. I know it was after the conventions, but no one was talking about that. They're like, he's got to get back on his feet. There's no getting back on Joe Biden's feet. In November, he's going to be 6 months older, 6 months further into this decline. It is not going to get better. And Democrats have an opportunity. This is my only concern as a Republican. It was so bad that Democrats have an opportunity to replace him. Of course, they've got the Kamala Harris issue, which is going to be a problem for them because they don't want her either. But that's going to be a serious conversation, one we have not had in America, Russ, since 1968.
Real quick. The reason I bring up the Obama-Romney matchup, yeah, he is younger, right? We can't control how old someone is when they're president, right? But it was a matchup about conduct, ability to push back on Romney, because Romney came out very aggressive. It was kind of a shocking. And people were surprised that Obama took the more statesman presidential route. He got it together as time went on. So if there is a second debate, then I think that the Biden campaign will learn from this. And I think, look, we just got to also talk about this. I think the Biden team definitely, it was a different format. And I'm not attacking the CNN format. That's what Trump did the whole time. Now he's praising CNN, which is laughable to me. But it was the format, 90 minutes, a long time, and I think that the president knew what he wanted to say. He knew the issues. He was prepared to talk about some slam dunk opportunities. But let's not gloss over this fact. Senior citizens particularly need to be worried about Social Security, right? Because Donald Trump was going to basically take your Social Security away. If you're looking at public safety, there was nothing that this president, ex-president, showed about January 6th. He pretty much showed no empathy. He didn't say anything that he could have done differently. So there are just things, we look at healthcare, job creations in this country. We're not talking about any of those issues. And I think that President Biden did have substantive things to say about that, but unfortunately, the way that he sounded and looked is dominating the conversation right now.
Well, quickly, Melita, should President Biden have had a better answer when it came to abortion?
He had a good answer, but he could have probably had a better answer. But certainly, Trump was not called out for the lies about late-term abortion and for saying that babies are being killed after they're born. I mean, that was just rubbish, absolute rubbish.
All right, Phil?
Let me respond to my colleague. You know darn well that the Democrat Senate, all the senators voted, including Ossoff and Warnock, for abortion right up to the time of birth. And Biden went along with that. And I think, Russ, the bottom line, like all elections, is your wallet. And I think people of all political stripes are thinking, who's going to do better for me the next 4 years when I can hardly, pay for my groceries, when credit card debt is an all-time high in this country? And I think Trump is the winner on that one.
Well, I think we all agree that's the #1 issue. Quickly, because we got to go.
He should have been let for bear on abortion in January the 6th, and instead what he gave us was gibberish and nonsense. Those were his missed opportunities where he really could have had a death blow, and he dropped the ball completely. And it's not just that he wasn't prepared, it's that he's incapable, and that is a takeaway from Thursday night's debate.
All right. Coming up next, we'll continue to talk about the presidential race, the latest AJC poll on the presidential race, and bipartisan groups weigh in on the security of our elections. We'll be right back.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
A new AJC poll finds young voters 18 to 29 years old are unhappy with their choices for president. 12% say they will vote for President Biden, 37% for President Trump. 86% say the country headed in the wrong direction. And that same poll has Trump at 43%, Biden at 38%, and RFK Jr. at 9%. That's a pretty big number considering he's not even officially on the ballot yet, although that is expected. Thurman, what's your reaction to all this?
Well, look, young voters have a right to be very concerned about this election, because I was once that young voter who always, was sort of more activist type and just always wanted to say, I want more, you want to see more. So, yes, they have a right to be heard. And this poll has been consistent, Russ. We have been hearing young voters are very concerned about this election. They're not excited about the candidates. But we saw similar numbers in 2020. And so what the Biden-Harris campaign did in 2020 is what they got to do again. You got to get the young voters in the room. You got to talk to them straight up. You got to figure out what's important to them. And what you'll find is that it's a lot less tied to a particular party. They're actually a little less partisan than we probably are in our younger age. They want to basically vote for the person. And so when you look at the RFK sort of emergence, he's just a third option, but they don't really know a lot about him.
Right.
And so you got three choices. Either you're going to vote for Joe Biden, you're going to vote for Donald Trump, or you're going to sit on the couch.
Stay home. Yeah.
And I think that we don't want people sitting on the couch. We want people going to vote for Joe Biden.
Phil, what's your reaction to RFK in particular getting 9%?
Well, I'm not surprised at all, and he is doing this in various other states too, and so I hope he's on the ballot. Now, you did have a 5-point lead with Trump in the poll you're citing with the AJC, and as I look at the Real Clear Politics just before we taped, Trump is ahead. This was even before the disastrous time that Biden had. Trump was ahead in all of the swing states, and so Trump's in good shape because of his messaging, and we're talking about how Biden's messaging has just collapsed.
All right. Would you like to get on this, Melita?
Well, I think when you think about RFK, you have to look at his misogynistic treatment of women over the years, and he is not going to appeal to any women voters who take a deep dive into looking into his record.
I got to imagine that young voters who were watching last night were probably not encouraged really in either direction.
Did any of them get an idea that there's going to be somebody who is going to lower the rising cost of apartments, or deal with the high interest rates that are keeping them from buying their first homes. These are the things that are on the minds of young voters. And the incumbent president is the one who takes the blame when people feel like they're having hard times. Biden didn't even manage to deliver the macroeconomic good news story that he can claim some direct accomplishment. He did talk about some empathy for how people are struggling, but he didn't provide a vision for how he's going to fix it. And he is going to be blamed for the tough times that people are facing. Yes, inflation is high, but so is unemployment is low. Wages are catching up, but people still feel squeezed because the cost of living has gone up so much. You may be able to have an apartment, but it may not be where you want it to be. You may have a car, but it may not be the car that you want to have. That is the economy that we're in, and it's hitting the Zs and the millennials, the younger millennials, much harder. I am shocked, and I'm sure Phil agrees, to see in the AJC poll that not only are the Zs, the 18s, the 29s, unhappy with both, they're actually going for Trump at much higher levels than for Biden. Democrats should own that demographic, and Trump is winning them.
Yeah, and some of them trust the former president more than President Biden when it comes to defending democracy, which I think was a surprising result in that Washington Post poll. Let's talk about voter fraud. 4 prominent Georgia politicians have formed a group that calls itself the Democracy Defense Project to counter what they say are falsehoods about stolen elections in Georgia. Former Governor Nathan Deal and former U.S. Senator Saxby Chambliss, both Republicans, have joined with former Governor Roy Barnes and former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin to bolster faith in the integrity of our election system. On the other side of the argument, the Bipartisan Coalition for Good Governance says the DDP should be paying more attention to the dangers associated with the theft of Georgia's voting system software. Phil, you wrote about this in James Magazine. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that you've got Roy Barnes and Nathan Deal. I think Shirley Franklin, as you mentioned. I think all of their hearts are in the right place. We all for integrity in our elections. We're all for fairness in our elections, I would hope. But you have people questioning elections, and I think that's fine, from Stacey Abrams to Donald Trump. And so all I would say is that when we're looking at integrity for elections, let's look at the state elections board to give a quick example. You've got new members on there. They have not done rulemaking since 2021. I think some rules need to be made before the November election and some plans made after the November election. Let's just take another example. Some of the nation's top cybersecurity experts say that our touchscreen machines are vulnerable. I think that's a serious problem that I would hope that Governors Barnes and Deal would agree that we need to ask some questions and we need to fix things. And so I hope the state elections board, when they meet soon, will come up with some rulemaking and do some reforms.
Theron, can you give me 30 seconds on this?
Look, I think look at the optics of this, right? I mean, Brian's former boss, Governor Deal, teaming up with former Governor Roy Barnes, former Mayor Shirley Franklin, the first African-American, first woman in African-American of the city of Atlanta, and also Saxby Chambliss, coming together. That, to me, it's a true symbolic spirit of bipartisanship. Now, they're going to have to figure out how they talk about fair elections going forward, but the fact that you have these 4 former elected officials saying, hey, we're going to come together to do something about integrity and voting, it's a good thing for the state. All right.
Coming up, do the statewide races for Public Service Commission in Georgia dilute black voting strength? We'll talk about that after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The U.S. Supreme Court has declined to hear a lawsuit against the way members of the Public Service Commission are elected in Georgia, meaning the members who represent districts will still run statewide. 4 black residents of Fulton County had argued that the statewide races dilute black voting strength in violation of the Voting Rights Act. So, Melita, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's strange that the court didn't allow this argument to go forward, because it is strange to have geographic districts that are then voted on statewide. It sort of flies in the face of some of the past rulings which don't allow, say, for example, at-large districts in large counties. But it is time for the voters to have a say about who sits on the Public Service Commission, because it's been years since they've had a vote because these elections were stayed while the litigation proceeded. So it'll be good that in next year you have a PSC race, and then again in 26 you have a PSC race.
Right. Yeah, I think the first one's going to be next year. Yes, in 2025. So Brian, what do you think about this argument that these people who represent districts running statewide, that this dilutes black voting strength?
Well, we have a black member on the Public Service Commission. The problem that the plaintiffs had wasn't that it was a lack of black representation. Theirs is a lack of Democratic participation. It's a black Republican who's on the board. That's their real problem with this. This is state law, and this is the Supreme Court stepping back and saying we're going to let states run elections, which is in the Constitution, something that they have the right to do. We have seen Democratic groups use the Voting Rights Act to sue the state over and over and over again, and in recent years have lost time and time again. They've used it as a cudgel. The fact is, in Georgia at large, not just the Public Service Commission, the black representation in elected office basically reflects our population statewide. In the congressional delegation, in the General Assembly, we've done a good job on making sure that black voters are able to elect candidates of choice in this state. And it's time to acknowledge that progress that we have made. And lastly, I'll say this. I'm glad this is over. The members have been serving in expired terms and voting. I have a real problem with that as a voter. That they need the credibility that comes with winning an election, not being in expired terms.
Okay. I watch this program every Sunday in my pajamas at home, and I've seen that you've talked about Douglas County Probate Judge Christina Peterson, and the Georgia Supreme Court had the final word on her, saying she portrays to the public an image of a judge who believes she is above the law. So the High Court agreed with the Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission, which recommended her removal. So is this over finally, Theron?
Well, these charges, Russ, have been going back all the way until, and I just want to check my notes here, to 2015. So I guess we can refer to her now as former Judge Christina Peterson, who, when coming into office was sort of, revered by a lot of the constituents in the area in which she was voted in. But she's had some tough allegations, which she's been pushing back on since 2015. And so let's just kind of bring it home for our viewers. And she got into a sort of a back and forth altercation with a police officer. The allegations are that she actually struck this police officer. She's saying that's false. There's been videos released to show that actually this was instigated by someone else and not her. She's taken to social media to talk about it. She's been on black radio talking about it. And so I think that while she's been removed, she's now got to figure out, okay, what happened, but she's got to push back on why. I think if you talk to people in the community in which she served and people that they're kind of over all of this, they're kind of ready to move on from it. But until I'm going to say let's not rush to judgment on the case. But we do have to be fair on the show and say that this woman did have a history of a lot of allegations about her conduct, homeowners association, and stuff that dealt with her being judged.
Give me 30 seconds.
Yes, Russ, you mentioned the Judicial Qualifications Commission, and they deserve a lot of credit for this. They investigate judges. They're the only oversight that judges have, the almighty judges. So over the last dozen years, I think about 15 to 20 judges have been removed due to the investigations of this great commission, and they got some good commissioners. And so, yeah, she was a disgrace to public office. They investigated, and she's gone, thank goodness.
All right. Phil, thank you. And winners and losers are next. Do stay with us for that.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Melita, let's start at your end of the table.
Well, my loser is the American public at the hands of CNN, because there was no fact-checking on the spot during that debate, and there should have been. What the fact-checking they did have was too little too late. And I also think that the exclusion of black news media outlets, as they were initially issuing press credentials for the debate, was against the fine reputation they once enjoyed.
Okay. If you don't mind my saying so, as someone who's moderated some debates, fact-checking on the fly when there is a lot is a lot to ask without then looking like you're putting your thumb on the scale.
Absolutely.
But I take your point. Phil?
No, I agree with you, Russ. My loser is the Biden campaign, and not just because their candidate had a terrible debate night, but I think they've treated Robert F. Kennedy horribly, no matter what you think of his politics. They refused to give him Secret Service protection. I thought that was a mean-spirited thing by Joe Biden. I understand he ordered that himself, and I think anyone running for president ought to have protection.
Darren?
All right, my first winner is going to be the city of Atlanta. Think about what just happened this weekend. You had a former president, a current president come to town. Traffic was dealt with. They over-communicated to the public about making sure that we bought ourselves some time. And also we had the Copa soccer event here as well. So definitely shout out to the city of Atlanta for managing that. And then Senator Ossoff is going to be my next winner. He was in East Point, Georgia this week, proposing a bill to invest over $20 million into the water infrastructure system in East Point. He was joined by a lot of local representatives there, State Representative Tanya Miller, the mayor, Ingram of East Point. And at a time when we know that infrastructure and water sewer is important going forward, I want to commend the senator for working with local government, doing his part as a federal official to make sure that we're proactive with dealing with infrastructure in this city and this region.
All right, about 40 seconds for you, my friend.
Well, I want to counterbalance what Melita said. I want to make CNN my winner. One, for bringing this to Atlanta, which is one of the swing states. We are going to be highly important in November. This is where it should have been. It was our first ever. And I thought that Jake and Dana comported themselves extraordinarily well. They didn't make the debate about them. They let the candidates talk. And then we can all decide on the back end who was telling the truth, who had good ideas, who had bad ideas. So congratulations to them for bringing this to Atlanta and making us the center of the political universe. And as a point of personal privilege, I'd like to congratulate my brother, Patrick Robinson, the new president of the Jefferson, Georgia Rotary Club. He's a pillar of the community.
Congratulations to him. Thanks to all of you. Lori will be back next week. I've enjoyed being here. Have a great Sunday.